This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. This show was made by HCLTech, a company that believes in partnership so much you can read their name on the Australian shirt. This show leans in hard on data and technology, so we are proud to work with HCLTech, leaders in their field. Morning everyone, this is the Scoreboard. I don't know what to say about this particular game, right? The two teams played each other for, I suppose, for a Champions Trophy spot. It just seems weird in the middle of a World Cup, right? I know sometimes these things happen, and the basketball World Cup people were playing to qualify for the Olympics and everything else, but this feels like it's in reverse. It's like trying to do slightly better at the Olympics so you can get yourself into something else. Anyway, England didn't bat particularly well again, lost a lot of wickets on the way through. And then eventually Ben Stokes did what I suppose he tried to do in the India game, was it the Australian game as well? But in some of the previous games where he chipped the ball around for a while and gave England a chance. In some ways, you would have to argue that this is exactly what the batting was set up to do, which is have a situation where you lose a lot of early wickets. So when Milan goes out, because they were doing it okay, but Milan goes out and he was 87 out of 139, which is ridiculous because he's not supposed to be the fast scoring one. And then they lose a bunch of wickets and they end up with Mo and Ali going out and they are 192 for 6, right? And if you think about the way the other teams in the World Cup are structured, so, and we'll get to this more later, there's a vast majority of teams that would have fallen apart at that point and wouldn't have put on a good total. But England is constructed so that even when that happens, you could still make a lot of runs. That used to be the strength. It's just that the construction has fallen apart for them. Anyway, they got more than enough runs. Netherlands never really in the hunt, in the game, in the chase, lost early wickets, then batted very slow, and then had a flurry towards the end as well after a decent little middle period, I suppose, when Scott Edwards made some runs and who's the other one? And Taja Nedmanera. It was nice to see him make some runs and also be not out after everything he did to get them into this position in the World Cup with those 200s that he made earlier in the year for them. But let us check the scoreboard. He says, then he has to remember where he's put it. All right. Yeah, so we need to talk about the kind of the last dying breaths of Ben Stokes' knees. And I think we need to do the maths on this a little bit, right? A while back, Stokes said he only had so many overs left in his knees. In fact, I don't think he said it, but I heard it from sources. Steve Harmison said it a lot, and Steve Harmison knows Ben Stokes. So I'm going to assume that someone around Ben Stokes or Ben Stokes himself was the person talking about this. And the thing about that is that it's not just that you need your knees to bowl. Batters need their knees as well. And knee injuries can end or hasten the decline of batting talent. And it's not the running between wickets, although sometimes it can be the running between wickets. More often than not, it's something to do with the bat path. And when your knees can't go exactly the way you want, your bat path gets affected. It's a big problem for hitters specifically. So Ben Stokes is not a hitter, but he has that part of his game just because it really does affect the flow and how the bat comes through it and everything else. But as most loan sharks will tell you, your knees are fairly important to you. So let's just so if you have a look here, he's obviously batting really, really well in this particular innings. I would say that all things considered, him and Milan are probably the best batters England have had, and the only batters England have had, maybe is the better term there. But I thought he looked pretty good through this innings. I actually liked the way he went about it. Again, we've seen him just be that insurance player. He's really digging in deep with the anchor side of things. When they got in a bit of trouble, that was a bad drop, by the way. That was a clanging drop, wasn't it? That's when you need the cymbal sound effect. But yeah, he was certainly put some pressure back on the Netherlands. Not quite as defensive as we've seen as some of those other innings. And then that partnership with Wokes sort of took the game away from the Netherlands there. Not Aaron Dutz best work that one. Although coming into a World Cup as a young finger spinner, you kind of expect those things to happen a lot more often to him than they actually have. But it was a good innings altogether. But the reason I was talking about his knees and everything else is because this is from the Matt Roller article on Cricinfo that teams receive a participation fee of around $500,000 for the Champions Trophy. And obviously, Matt was talking about here about the Dutch and how important it was for them to beat England and put themselves in a position to make that Champions Trophy, because that money for them is huge, right? That allows for so many things that them to do. Not to mention they can pick up a sponsor off the back of that as well. They're in the Champions Trophy. It's another chance to get more press, more fans, all those sorts of things. But what I thought was interesting about this is I was trying to factor in how much Ben Stokes' knees are worth to England at this point. And I'd say they're obviously worth a lot more than 500K. But the 500K is just the start of it. If you think about if England go to the Champions Trophy, their sponsors, you're more likely to get bigger sponsors next time. If they miss a Champions Trophy, the sponsors might be like, well, why would we put lots of money into you? Because we can't be sure you're actually going to make that next big trophy. You've also got, all the bad press and the bad PR. They've had incredible PR over the last couple of years because of the World Cup wins and then the Bazball. You don't really want to stop that. There's a new book coming out every 8 minutes on how great English cricket is. All these things matter. Then you've just got, of course, the fans. So it's more than 500K, right? Whether it's to England or to the Dutch, you're looking at quite a few $1 million probably is the difference between playing in that Champions Trophy and not playing in that Champions Trophy when all things are considered. So you can make a very good argument then that Stokes' knees are worth draining, in order to get there. But I think the opposite argument is that once they didn't make the semi-finals and they were in a situation where they could have put him on literal ice, he's already getting the operation on his knee at the end of this World Cup anyway. Would it not have made more sense at that point to be able to go off and make sure that he's able to play more tests for them, which are probably more profitable than the Champions Trophy, and also the T20 World Cup, which they are defending, attacking champions. I don't know what term they're going to use next time, but that'll be fun. But either way, I thought he was really good again today. And as I sort of said in the intro as well, one thing I liked about the way they batted today, game doesn't matter or anything, but that is what England is supposed to do. So just to go back to, if you think of India or Australia or South Africa, they might all be better teams at the moment than England, and certainly are playing a lot better than England. But they would find it hard to go on from 190 to make 350, or what did England end up on? 339, right? They would find that very, very hard. It's not to say they couldn't do it, but it would take something quite special, I think, if they were 6 wickets down so early in the game to be able to make those runs. That's not the case with England, right? And they're designed to be like this. It's just that maybe the design was fine, but everything else had fallen apart for them. All right, let's move on to David Malan. So I found this one a little bit interesting. I think there's a lot of hate for David Malan, the ODI player, that is actually bleeding over from T20 cricket. And as someone who has my questions about him as a T20 player and the efficiency at which he scores and the way he scores quickly but takes a while to score quickly and all those sorts of things, I can understand that. But I've said this before, he's a fantastic one-day player. So far in one-day cricket, he's averaging over 50 at roughly a run a ball. Not from a huge amount of games. I would say he's not played anywhere near as many one-day games as he should. But he makes a lot more sense in this. And as an anchor who could score a run a ball, there are a lot of teams in this tournament that would absolutely like Australia would probably die to have David Malan in their middle order at the moment, ahead of someone like Marnus Labuschagne. And it's not that they think that Labuschagne is not the superior batter. I think they would make an argument that is not the case, and that's probably fair. But Malan just gets white ball cricket. He's one of those players who has worked out the code of how to score and everything else. And clearly he's not a perfect batter or anything like that, but he's very good at those sorts of things. I found this interesting just because it kind of shows you everything about English cricket. He's got the highest average. If you want to say Malan's been their best batter or Stokes has been the best batter, feel free to make those claims. But they've both got roughly the same kind of records, as I'll show you in a second. But it is funny that even being their best batter, this is his bilateral ODI record, and this is his record in this World Cup. It's like they just can't take a trick. Even when a guy's in form, He's just not in the form that he's normally in for them. Let's go on just to England's batting in general, because I almost feel like this is unfair, of course, because they've actually won this game, but they weren't particularly impressive. So within that, but I did just want to, take a bit of a trip around the board here. I think, because I think this is quite interesting. So you've got Milan up here and you've got Stokes. So Milan's made a lot more runs, but yeah, average of 46, strike rate of 103. Stokes, 220 runs, a strike rate of 83. We've seen him have to play a little bit slower at times, an average of 44. I do love the fact that Atkinson and Wood have done so well. But let's go to the absolute bottom. Let's forget Sam Curran, because I don't think, how many, was it 2 innings or 3 innings? But anyway, Liam Livingstone was in, I would say, arguably better form than David Milan the last time I saw them bat in the flesh, which was the New Zealand one days just before the World Cup, right? So it was in England. Livingstone looked incredible. We've seen Livingstone be really good in the IPL before, on a level that Milan hasn't. He goes over to this World Cup, 60 runs at a strike rate of 63, an average of 10. Now, some of that strike rate probably comes down to the situations he's been in. Some of that strike rate is because he's found it really hard to hit the ball off the square in a way that doesn't make any sense for Liam Livingstone at all, as someone who's seen him play a lot in his career, right? So, let's be honest, his form is, I think the generator of the colors did this on its own. But it is worth noting that it did pick brown for Livingstone. These are not my words. This is the words of Flourish, the graph makers. Anyway, Mo and Ali, basically a non-entity, right? Their best ODI batter of all time, 111 runs at even the strike rate's not great, 89, and just an average of less than 15, right? Bairstow, 156 runs from your opening batter. I mean, he hit a 6. Was it first or second ball of the tournament? And then literally has not done a thing since then. These are the only 2 that I would say that have done okay. And okay, I'm probably being nice to Joe Root to say okay here. Harry Brook, I mean, he's averaging 27 with a strike rate of 104, right? It's okay. Again, both of these players, obviously, at the very least, you'd want them up here. But it is incredible to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 batting talents who can all play a role. We're not expecting Mo and Ali to be, up here with a high average or anything, but we also don't expect him to have a strike rate of 71, right? It's just absolutely mind-bending to me how bad they've been. And sorry to all the England fans who finally tuned into a win and I'm still going in. But look, their batting talent has been somewhere between mediocre and shithouse. And that's just where we are. Let us get on to the next bit. I spent an awful lot of time with this today because I was very, very fascinated with this because Netherlands had another run out. So you could see here, Barisi chips this on the leg side. There's a lot of confusion here. So I just want to show you this bit. And there was another good camera angle, but I couldn't find it. But you can see here, where are we? I just want to show you how slow he's running. Right? It's really, really weird. And then there's the confusion. They make a late decision. So he makes a late decision when the ball's in the hand that there's going to have to be a run. Well, why would you do that? So, and you can see that's Engelbrecht, isn't it? You can see there that Engelbrecht is looking at Wokes with the ball in his hand there. Actually, it's out of his hand. And he's still thinking he should run. It's madness. And obviously, Barisi went way over, way too much. I think one of them was running really hard. One wasn't. Then there was a mix up. Then they both got confused. And I think also because Engelbrecht was moving, even though the ball was already in the air, I think that confused Barisi even more. And obviously England do the run out. Now, it's fine. I do feel like, the vast majority of the scoreboards I've done in the Netherlands have been on about 3 topics and runouts has been one of them. But now I want to go deep into this because I've been showing them all the time. But what I really wanted to do here is go into the details, into the weeds a little bit. So that means that now Netherlands have had 10 runouts in this World Cup. As you can see, no other team has 5. This is an awful lot of runouts. But what I wanted to know is kind of what does that mean, right? In comparison, it's worth having a look here. There is a team missing. And don't worry, there isn't going to be a quiz section of this show or anything, but I didn't even pick it up straight away until I started doing the advanced numbers, and I was like, oh wait, someone hasn't had a run out. The team is South Africa. And I have put on the next graph actually coming up, and I should have put a little asterisk. But anyway, in T20 cricket, you get, I think, about 5% of dismissals are runouts. I think in ODI cricket, that's slightly less than that off the top of my head. But let's say it's 5%. I think we can all say 12.8% is quite a step up on that. It's obviously, almost was more than twice. Maybe and I would say that in one-day cricket, the run-out rate should be around 4%. So you're looking at over three times as bad as you should be for run-outs. I mean, no one's surprised about that, but it does look quite dramatic when you put it here. This is between the World Cup. Sorry, I'll get to the South Africa number in a moment because it is quite interesting. But this is between the World Cups. This is how many run-outs that teams have had. So you can see that here we have Sri Lanka at the top, Bangladesh there, and Netherlands third. England's down here, and I want you to remember that for a little while. Also, you can see South Africa on the good end, but also a little bit towards the middle. So it would suggest to you that their run-out ratio in the World Cup has flattered them a little bit. But anyway, or their lack of run-out ratio. The problem with this, of course, is that if I just look at run-outs between the World Cups, not all these teams played the same amount of games. And so I was going to do it on games. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense either. The best way to look this up, of course, is to take out all the boundaries and look at literally how many runs you make when you're running, non-boundary runs or runs, and then divide that by how many wickets you lose in runouts. So let's start with England. They are remarkable between those last two World Cups, and think of all the different players they've had and everything else. They don't get run out very often at all. That is a huge amount. And you'll see that South Africa's general form holds up pretty well. And there is a trend here. But before we get to the trend, the Netherlands are the worst running between wickets team I found. To be fair, you could argue there's not much between them and Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh and Pakistan are all there as well. And this is the trend. So I would group these four together, and I would certainly then group these four together. And Afghanistan and New Zealand, I think New Zealand probably. I'm not quite sure where to put either of these teams, but the trend here is that these are the teams who find it easiest to hit boundaries, right? All these teams have players who at any moment can just hit a boundary for you and do very well. And these are the teams who you would say are the strike rotating teams. And so Ravi Shastri said on the commentary that he believed that it was because the Indian crowds are louder and that the Dutch aren't used to playing in front of those levels of crowds. And so there's a communication error. I'm not sure there is a communication error. We just saw Engelbrecht literally looking at the ball leaving the fielder's hand. Feels like there's another problem going on here. I think what is happening is that the Dutch know that they don't have, a great batting lineup. And so one of the things that they've been pushing is trying to get as many runs as possible, out of stealing a single or turning a 1 into a 2 or even looking for 3s at times. And it's not working because they are not good at it, and it's not worth it. You shouldn't be getting, you shouldn't be having a run out every 170 runs, right? That's just not a good number here. All these four teams, I would argue, are not doing particularly well. The only thing I didn't factor in, which I would love to, is I would probably, if I was doing a more advanced metric on this and had more time. Unfortunately, the Netherlands fell apart before I did get more time. The other thing I would take out is probably runouts in the last 5 overs to see if that plays a part. But honestly, having watched them run between wickets, I would say they are not very good at running between wickets. And it's interesting too, because we look at them as a team that gets the most out of themselves. And someone was saying in the Discord chat today, I might have been quiet, was saying today that they're also not very good at reviewing, right? So there's a few. We talk about them being a good fielding team and making the most out of themselves and all this sort of stuff. But reviewing and running between wickets are two things they could probably be a lot better than. Another interesting thing about running between wickets is it's a very, very hard thing to practice. And it's a very hard thing to change as as an individual. It's more a team culture thing of how you look at them. And one reason I thought that you might have all these teams here is not just because these are some of the better teams in the world, although not anymore, but I also thought that if these teams, they don't have to steal twos and threes and take risky singles because they know they can catch up with boundaries. Whereas I think because this pattern exists, that Netherlands is a part of that, but it's still something I'd almost rather see them take risks with boundaries than with runouts. But maybe they've weighed that up, and they've got analysts as well. And it's possible because it's been so dramatic in this World Cup. It's possible they don't even know that this is a problem they've had for a long time. That would be really, really interesting. Sadly for them. So that was between the two World Cup cycles, and this is in this one. So this is South Africa. There should be an asterisk here because I haven't had a dismissal. Pakistan's just had the one run out, and you can see the Netherlands getting a run out every 76.7 runs. Runs, non-boundary runs. It's not good though, is it? All right, let's move on to the other thing they're not very good at. Now I just feel like this would be really unnecessarily negative today. Although maybe it's just the game, right? It's just dragged it out of me. Anyway, it's another day ending with a Y, and so I regret to inform you that we have to talk about the Netherlands openers again. They are quite clearly the worst opening team in the tournament. I'm not even going to mention the openers' names at this point because I feel like they've just been through too much on their own. But they're basically averaging nothing from their opening spot. It's void. It doesn't exist. And their regular openers did a great job to get them to this World Cup. They've been really good at other times as well. In the golden summer of Dutch cricket, certainly saw some great work there by Vikram at times, and obviously ODI. I mentioned their names. I didn't mean to. They've had to change their openers in this tournament. I talked about even Logan van Beek opening for them as a sort of a shock tactic just because the rest wasn't working. But it's been really bad. But I just want to point out as well, you see how much Australia is relying on their opening batters here. And obviously India's been fantastic too. But I just want to point out that how bad this is, because what you have here is they're averaging 15 with their opening partnership, which is, bizarre. But they're going at a run rate of 3.6 runs and over. And in some games, I think there was a game where Shane Watson was saying on commentary, they need to go faster here. They need to go faster here. There's a reason they are struggling. And I shouldn't say there's a reason they're struggling. They are not going fast because it's not working for them at all. Like, attacking isn't working for them, and defense hasn't worked for them. They're just trying to hang in, and it's not working for them. That's what these numbers suggest. This is not a, slogging till they die pact that has gone wrong for them. They've just not been able to hit the ball off the square, whether they try and block, whether they try and bat normally, whether they try and attack. It's been horrendous for them. And again, today, I thought probably England got about 40 runs more than that. A 282.90 score, I would have been really interested to see how the Dutch went. But once, Wokes and Stokes moved it beyond that, certainly then I thought England were massive favourites. That said, a good opening partnership might have changed my mind. But I was not expecting one, and I did not receive one. All right, that's the end of the scoreboard today. Any questions that you have, please put them through. Obviously, I'll answer all your super chats or discuss all your super chats. But we'll have a quick break here. And then after the break, we will come back with what you're talking about in the chat. Support us on Patreon. Join for exclusive perks like AMAs, live calls with me, and a vibrant Discord community. Enjoy ad-free content, early podcast episodes, and access to my emailer, plus behind-the-scenes stuff. We've built our channel on Patreon support, so a huge thanks to everyone who has helped. If you like these live chats, head over to our main channel where we have all sorts of video on this World Cup. There'll be several every week with all the latest trends, stories, and incredible historical content. All right, welcome back. Let me see what I have here. Ethan says, should England replace players who weren't playing the next ODI World Cup straight away or wait until after the T20 World Cup next year if they believe these players in their best 11? So I think this is really interesting, Ethan, and I'll tell you why. Not quite for the reason you've asked, although it's a valid question that you've asked. But I think this is really interesting because are they in a situation where the same players are of use to them, right? So, for instance, you might say to yourself, well, okay, we want to be good in the T20 World Cup next year. So any ODIs we play between now and then should be development squads, right? But they don't have now a lot of time to pivot back to T20. Maybe because players play a lot more domestic T20, it doesn't matter. But with the England players who want to play in that T20 World Cup, the sort of guys that you would want to move on from before the next ODI World Cup, are they going to want to request to play in T20 cricket? In ODI cricket, just to get more white ball experience before that T20 World Cup or not? So it's really confusing now because England have made it into this thing of, we're going to go all in with each format. But if you're a white ball England player right now, I would assume before that next World Cup, you would want to play as much cricket as possible at the international level under white ball, whether that be ODI or T20. But that doesn't actually help them develop that team for the next ODI World Cup. So that's why I find your question so interesting. I don't know how to answer that, right? I don't know what direction they should go. But I would probably start by talking to the players. I'd get Rob Key and the players all in together, and the coaching staff, and just be like, what do you want to do on an individual base or as a team base, right? We think we're not selecting you guys for the next T20 World Cup at the moment, but more or less we think you guys are going to be it. Do you want to play more one-day cricket, or can we actually start to play other players in the one-day setup now, so that in 4 years' time, or even for the Champions Trophy, we have our new team in place? It's really interesting. Pac-Man Heaven says, what is your opinion on 20 teams in the ICC T20 World Cup? It'll be the biggest ICC event in terms of teams. And if the 50-over World Cup gets replaced, does it mean that we'll see 3 T20 World Cups in a row? Well, I don't think that next one-day World Cup will be replaced. We actually did. There's a show on here with me and Bayram did. I think I might have done a video on it or written an article on it as well. I think that next 50-over World Cup will remain. But yet, it's a fair point of, I don't think what we will see is 3. I could be wrong, but I'd be surprised if the ICC weren't smarter than saying, I think having a World Cup every 2 years is fine. I mean, I prefer it every 4 years, but I can understand the idea of having it every 2 years. And they've already done that anyway. But my bigger concern then is, how these things go ahead, because I don't think you can have 3 every 4 years with an Olympics the other year. I just think that's messy and unnecessary. So from that point of view, it's a problem. And they do have to think about that. But I don't think they're going to make that change right at the moment. What's my opinion on 20 teams in the ICC? Look, I would prefer more teams in a World Cup. I think that's what a World Cup is for. A World Cup is for growing the game, for the memories that it creates. You want every team that plays cricket in the world to think we have a chance of making it to that World Cup. And if you don't do that, you stifle growth, right? And as a historian, I can tell you that Fiji and Denmark and Argentina and all these different countries that were good at cricket at different times, if we'd had the World Cup and made it more open, there would have been more of a push in some of those countries to keep going. But they had nothing really to play for, because even being good the way that Denmark was didn't help them, right? And Denmark was certainly of a quality that deserved to be at a World Cup at their best. Argentina in a similar sort of situation, right? Of probably should have been a test nation, weren't given that, and just cricket faded away there. Why would we want that to happen? So I like more teams. I know the hardcore cricket fans quite often get upset because they're like, oh, we want the best games. We can do that. We can have a tournament. We still have a lot of teams. And you still actually have, a decent, chunk of round robin in the middle, or, a super 8 concept, or super 10 concept, or super 6 concept, or whatever you want it to be. We still have that available to us in a World Cup. But we want the other teams there as well. And who's watched this World Cup and thought to themselves that Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Netherlands, Afghanistan haven't added to it, right? We can continue to do that as a sport, and that's what that 20 team does for me. Another one from Pac-Man Heaven. What do you think last night's game did for ODIs? So this is a very important thing. Is when I made the movie on Test cricket, and Mike Atherton was writing an article about the movie. It's called Death of a Gentleman. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix, I think. I think it's on YouTube, but they don't call it Death of a Gentleman on YouTube. I don't know why. But anyway, as long as someone gets paid, I don't get paid. But as long as someone gets paid for it, I'm happy. But when we were making that film, we were making a film about the future of tests and how they were struggling and why they were struggling and the corruption within the game and all these different things. And there were 2 good test matches played back to back. And Mike Atherton wrote a piece going, despite the fact that some people are making a film about the end of test cricket, actually test cricket's in a great state, as you saw by these games the other day. Everyone's really excited. And I said to Atherton, that's not how it works. If that was how it worked, test cricket would have been fine. And one-day cricket would be fine. We have exciting one-day games quite regularly. The West Indies-Netherlands game, has there ever been a game at a qualifying event that more people have seen the highlights of ever, or know about, or know roughly what happened in, right? We've had magnificent ODI games, and we will continue to as long as we play the format. That isn't the issue here. The issue is that fans have turned to a different format for their casual cricket watching, that it is easy to monetize that other format, certainly at the domestic level, but ever increasingly at the international level as well. And that our World Cups are not the issue. The T20 World Cup still doesn't make as much money as the 50 over World Cup, right? It's everything outside the World Cup. And Maxwell's still going to play in the IPL. He's still going to play in the Big Bash. He's still going to play T20s for Australia, right? So even if one day stopped tomorrow, you would still have your Maxwell field. So, I think what that game shows us, and you could say the same as the Kapil Dev innings or the Kevin O'Brien innings, Viv Richards innings, any of those great innings that we've seen when a team is chasing and they've got themselves in trouble, or a team has got themselves in trouble batting first. Is that and this is my big point of why one-day cricket should continue to work. And there's many political reasons and also admin reasons why there are issues. But the basic thing is that when you have an innings like Maxwell's, the ratings go through the roof for 2 hours. So him and Cummins were together for 2 hours. And from about half an hour in, when he starts to go nuts, people start to switch on to that game, right? In T20 cricket, that is the innings. So in T20 cricket, unless an opener goes absolutely ballistic, and then you won't have the drama of all the wickets falling beforehand, unless they're falling at the other end, of course, you don't get that hour and a half long, right? And we might get a 3.5 hour innings, or a 3 hour innings, or a 2 hour innings, or whatever that may be in one-day cricket. So from a ratings perspective, and from a social media perspective, and from a branding perspective, one-day cricket still makes a lot of sense. So that's what that game showed, but that game doesn't change the fact that next time Australia play Afghanistan, let's say they played them in a bilateral, which of course they didn't, but let's say they did. They play them in a bilateral and they're playing them in Darwin, and it's off season and the footy's on. No one's going to watch it, mate. And it doesn't matter if Maxwell does something like that. Janla says, can we restart the World Cup now that England finally look ready? Do they? They've looked better. I'm not sure I've looked at them and gone, I thought they looked pretty shoddy at times today. Honestly, if Stokes was caught at fine leg when he played that hook shot, Netherlands could still have won this game, right? So, and this is why we did this Uncovered episode, and everyone got really upset about ifs and buts, because I was talking about how I thought India had been challenged at times, but had actually come over it well. And they had shown that they were not invincible, but they'd also shown that they had the ability to get over adversity, which I thought was a positive thing for Indians. But apparently that wasn't. Apparently I'd misread the situation. But let's put that to a side for a moment. The reason I do analysis like the way I do it is, well, you can see England win that game, but you can also see that in some ways the batting order worked the way it was designed, but as the backup. So the first thing you want is an English batting order is for the openers to go ballistic at the top, then the middle overs guys to do their magic, and then for Butler and Livingston to come in and just end the game with a couple of tail end hitting moments, right? That's how it is supposed to work. And then the backup is that one guy from the middle should be able to bat through to the end, and there's enough batting deep enough that you can still get a total that you can defend. So they got their secondary option in this game. But they still looked pretty ropey. Right? They didn't look sensational. They were fine with the ball, but certainly with the bat, I wasn't sitting there going, oh, well, if we restarted the tournament now, I was sitting there going, if we restarted the tournament now, it'd still be pretty crap. I wasn't actually thinking if we restarted the tournament now, although let's do it. Subrat says, I still remember the 2013 Champions Trophy finals. I love the tournament and was sad to see it go. Is there a way to raise its prestige because it struggles to justify its existence? I've always thought it was kind of pathetic. I'm the wrong person to be asking this one of Subrat. I was at that final and the 2017 one. Well, I mean, it's a one-day tournament. So I kind of like the idea of, if we're going to have a 20-team World Cup in T20 cricket, I kind of like the idea of a knockout 32-team T20 tournament. Get everyone in. What kind of randomness could that be, right? And it would be, maybe I'm being too dramatic. Maybe you don't do it that way, but I'd love to that was what the actual Champions Trophy was originally to help the associates. And of course, they completely screwed the pooch by making it the opposite. But I love the idea of doing something like that or something else that's very different to the World Cup. And the Champions Trophy kind of was aiming towards that until we made the World Cup almost exactly the same as the Champions Trophy, which again didn't make any sense. So I do think there is a way of having it so it's interesting and it's different. But there's so many problems. One is the rankings aren't particularly good because teams don't play each other all that much. Can you really trust the rankings? Probably not, right? And that's why they're doing it this way. It's, the whole playing it in England over and over again actually makes a lot of sense. But eventually, other people are going to request it. It's probably not going to work as well outside of England as it will inside England. I kind of only think England and India could host the Champions Trophy anymore. I mean, hopefully it goes to Pakistan and it does brilliantly because Pakistan hasn't had anything like that in a long time. But in general, I mean, going forward. But yeah, if you're going to have it, I don't care if it's one day or T20. But I think it has to be radically different to the World Cup. And I think that's the bit they haven't got right so far. Even having the top 6 teams. 2 groups of 3. There's all sorts of cool, different things that you could do with that tournament, I think. And, I think at its best, it's supposed to be the Euros, right? The problem is that it's never really been set up that way. And then when they did set it up that way, they had a World Cup that was almost identical. It has to be different to the World Cup. And if they're going to make it like the Euros, or it needs to be its own different version of the Euros that works for cricket. But yeah. Can anyone tell me who won today? Says Dr. Yash. Cricket was the real winner. Pushkal says, do batters not need to go to loo or pee while batting in long innings? Does this have something to do with them perspiring a lot? Did they not eat much solid food or match? I'm loving all this. You can go to the toilet, but you have to be very quick. So you generally, you will see some batters will go off at the drinks break. Generally, batters will nervously wee and poo as much as possible before they go out to bat. I think there's a natural part of this, but there's also I think there's that natural nervousness comes in when you're going into bat, but also they know that they might be out there for a long time. But no, you certainly see players go off at drinks breaks and everything else. But I'm pretty sure you can last 2 hours without needing the toilet. Pushka, I would like to think you can anyway. And if that's the case, then so can players. And then it's very rare they're going to have 2 hours without any kind of break at all, right? There will be a drinks break or anything else. But it's very rare for a player to go off during an innings just because, So if let's say you're a test batter, you will literally be going to the toilet before you go out to bat. The wicket will then fall and hopefully close to when you last went to the toilet. You'll go out to bat and then let's say you first drop and you bat for an hour and a half. Then you've got the lunch break. You'll wee at the start of the lunch break. You'll wee at the end of the lunch break. And then you go out to bat for another 2 hours. I think you can handle that. But the sweating thing is probably also a factor. But I'm not an expert on wee versus sweat when it comes to that. Or am I an expert on that? I might be an expert on that. I did once write about that. R says, umpires are generally older than 50. Shouldn't they be younger? They are likely to have better eyesight if they're younger. Yes. I mean, there's a lot of decision making. So there is a lot of good knowledge, but I think the majority of the reason that this exists is because why do you think young people want to become umpires? Like, who decides they want to become an umpire rather than a cricketer? Right? It's a very rare subset of person that wants to do that. A lot of the umpires in the world are either very good club cricketers, or Murray Erasmus was a first-class cricketer. Then you've got a lot of international cricketers. Well, no one's going to retire early to become an umpire, although international umpiring is a really, really well-paid job. But you don't see your family, and you don't see your home bed for a long time. But it is a very, they're very well paid and very well looked after, those guys. But and I was going to say women as well, but the women are not on the elite panel yet, are they? But yeah, so guys at the moment still. So I think that's part of the problem. I just don't think we've developed umpires very well, especially certainly in certain parts of the cricket world. I think we haven't trained umpires up in a way. But Simon Torfel was certainly a younger umpire, and I think that probably helped him at certain times. And you've got a point about the eyesight and everything else, but also experience is really, really important with umpiring and knowing the tricks. It's one reason why, and this is not a good time to bring it up, but one reason why Murray Erasmus is such a good umpire is not just the decision making. It is literally his ability to have seen everything in cricket. And so that does play a big part of it as well. But you're also absolutely not wrong there. I'll take another quick break, and then we'll come back. And if there's anything else in the chat, but I'm Jared Kimber. This is the Scoreboard. We're here every single day. I mean, if you don't believe we're here every single day when we're here for this game, I don't know what to tell you. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my name in KIMBER and get 3 months free today. Thank you to VK for the support. This is not a game we expect a lot of super chats in, VK. So I didn't see a comment after it, but thank you very much for the support either way. And I'm sure Rakesh will flag it up if there is a comment in a bit. Puneet says, can you be a cricket commentator or pundit without having played any cricket at any level? Yes. No, you can. John Norman, I suppose John Norman has played some cricket though, hasn't he? I'm trying to think of someone who's played no cricket. It's really hard. I think that is very fair to say. I think the majority of the people I've seen fail as commentators haven't played any cricket. And so when you're commentating, it's a really interesting thing that you need to know, but you need to instantly know where all the field positions are. And I know you think you know where all the field positions are, but if you haven't played cricket, visualizing them in your head. If someone plays off their pad, right? There's nothing in my, I don't need to think that's gone to backward square leg, because instantly I'm already thinking that that's where that ball will go, right? And so even if I just saw the player play the shot, I would be able to tell that. Whereas someone who hasn't played cricket, sometimes what they will need to do is actually look to that position on the field and think right-hander, and that's there. And there's a couple of commentators that I've heard that they have this pause in their commentary, and the pause is them trying to make that. Now, once you have that moment, it means that everything, you're picking up outswingers, all the little shibboleths of cricket are very, very tough. So I think, I don't want to throw John Norman under the bus, but I think John Norman would be someone who has probably played, some of the least amount of cricket, who can be a very good commentator. But I certainly know a lot of other people who've played no cricket who do struggle. I can't think of anyone who's not played cricket at any level who's a natural commentator. And And so they get a bit stuck. It doesn't mean they can't call the game, because it is slightly different. The pundit part, look, eventually we'll probably have pundits who might have data backgrounds or video backgrounds or something else, right? And I do think that is possible. I don't think cricket would hire anyone like that at the moment, if we're being honest. I don't even think they wanted me. I remember when I was with Scotland, I was a ball came over to me, and like, to be a smarty, like, I bowled it back, but I bowled it back as a wrong-un. And of course, like, I hadn't picked up a cricket ball and bowled it in like a month, and it came out terribly, because why would you bowl a wrong-un like fresh when you haven't been picked up a ball in a month to bowl it? And like, I literally had to go back and bowl a proper leg spinner to show them I could bowl for them. And you could almost see their faces go, oh, that's okay. So there is a big part of that within it. So yes, I do think that plays a part. There are analysts who haven't played cricket at any level. Joe Harris, who worked for RCB for a couple of years, I think, certainly one that comes to the top of my head. So it does happen. It does exist. A pundit, unless we get to the point where you are talking, sort of data-led or video-led or journalism-led type things, and we quite often don't. I think it would be hard at the moment, the way that cricket is run, but it is not impossible. Sitesh says, love the way you put up with some nonsense that you come across on these platforms very sensibly. Look, it's a part of the gig. Like, not everyone knows everything. And, so I get angry with some of the comments. There's some of the ones about Maxwell yesterday that annoyed me. And there'll be other comments tomorrow. And that same person will ask another question that I think will be brilliant the next day, right? But I'm not expecting everyone to know everything. And I'm also not expecting everyone to have the same background or the same, they don't follow cricket in the same way or anything like that, right? And so, look, you two can be a bit, you guys are really, really good here, but we get some idiots sometimes on here as well. On a day like today, we're probably just going to get proper fans, but on the busier days, we're going to get some idiots in, right? And it is part of the gig. And I think for me, you got to remember, I'm very different than a lot of other people with, like, I'm 15 years in the business, but I am 15 years in the online media business, right? Other than a little bit of work in magazines and writing a few books, almost everything I've ever done has been online. And so I started as a blogger. So one of the first posts I got, which is absolutely ripping me to shreds. The first podcast I did literally said, you're never going to be able to speak for a living. Give up. You're an idiot. Right? I'm so used to that and I'm not saying that all the stuff we get here is negative. It might be negative about teams or players or, just nonsensical. But the point is that I have grown as a media, whatever, personality in that environment. And so, I'm used to, I started on YouTube. That was like one of my first big breaks in my career. I was making stuff on YouTube before anyone knew what YouTube was. I started on MySpace, right? That's how far back I go on these sorts of things. I probably started my first blog in 2001, right? Like, I go back a long way with these sorts of things. So I'm used to how the internet works or doesn't work, Sitesh. Matthew says, are there any unusual or never tried strategies that you thought would like to see teams try and resurrect in the modern era? I'd like to see teams actually run on the last ball no matter what every single game. That is one. I want in-swing bowlers who are really swinging the ball a long way to bowl around the wicket. I know it does happen occasionally, but I would like to see more of that, especially in women's cricket. That is one that instantly comes to my head. I'm trying to think of other things that teams could do. I think more bowlers should use the crease more in a way that Mark Watt does. I think more bowlers should also use the crease in width ways, the way that Mark Wood or Shane Warne or Mohammad Siraj does. So there's a couple of things that I think people could use more. Because when I was young, one thing I did, Matthew, was I would bat in the crease, and then if I got a short ball, I'd pull it for 4, and then the next ball I'd bat 1.5 meters out of the crease, and then I'd get a half volley. And I'm not a good enough batter to be able to do that against proper bowling, right? But I could do it against, average sort of seam bowling. And that is what international cricketers are now doing. And they haven't been doing that as much. And so there are so many little things that I think could be brought in. And I also don't understand why all off spinners aren't bowling knuckleballs, right? Because it's a lot of the thing about the knuckleball is you need big hands to be able to do it. And I just think that every international off spinner or finger spinner should be able to bowl a knuckleball. Subrot says, make it 16-team knockouts. Yeah, I don't mind the 16-team knockout thing. I just would have thought maybe they would want more games, more teams to turn up. To be honest, I'll probably do 16 teams just because 32 teams is a lot of teams to bring out for one game, right? But I'm just saying there are definitely other ways to do it. I make it 40 overs. They probably won't do that, but I love 40 over cricket, so I'm always here for 40 over cricket. Sukant says, this is completely unrelated, but have you ever talked about why Bradman was so much better than everyone else? So we did a video on him where we talked about what it would be like if you time traveled Bradman at the age of 18 and brought him into modern cricket. There's a lot of stuff about Bradman's batting there. His footwork was absolutely extraordinary as far as how quick he moves his feet. I think that's a huge part. Obviously, he had brilliant hand-eye coordination, although turns out maybe not as good eyesight as we thought. If the army rumor is to be believed, I think you need to think about Bradman very similar to how you would think about Virat Kohli in one-day cricket, Shan Masood, Dawid Malan. And I know that's going to sound really weird, but in a way that they have worked out a formula in which it allows them to score runs in white ball cricket consistently over and over and over again. They're always going to average more than other people do because they've worked out this formula. Bradman, I think, worked out in cricket in that era how to do a very similar thing because the bowling wasn't as developed as it is today. And if you look at his era, we also had Hammond and Headley. So we had and Hobbs was just before him and Sutcliffe. So you have 5 players who all have just ridiculous records, right? And I don't think that's an accident. And I think it also comes at a point before short pitch bowling takes over, and Hammond and Bradman certainly struggled with short pitch bowling. And I think those things are all related, that batting was a little bit more one-dimensional at that point. And the thing that most of those guys struggled with was the one variable they couldn't handle, which was the wet wickets, right? Whereas there had been other players who weren't as good as them that were good on the wet wickets. But they got to a point when the wicket was doing what they wanted it to be, they had almost clocked batting at that point. And I think I talked about that in my book about the subject, and eventually I'll do another book just on batting. But that's what I think they did. I think Bradman, in his way, clocked batting by working out there are only so many variables that could happen to him in any situation, which is why I think body line actually affected him, because how could he be ready for that? It had never really happened to him consistently ever before. BK says, hey, Jared, still in awe of Maxie's innings. Yeah. Thought I witnessed the GOAT innings until I remembered Capel's knock. That 175 is worth 300 surely today. No. I mean, look, I think it was incredible, Capel's knock. I mean, we can't see it, so it's hard to go back through it. I think you could make a claim for either of them to be the best one-day innings of all time, and you could also make a claim for several other innings, as we talked about yesterday on the show, actually, and on the main channel. If you haven't seen the Maxwell video, it's worth having a look at. So yeah, I think with that in mind, I think you make an argument that Capel's knock was there. I certainly think Maxwell's was against better bowlers, and there is a big difference between a chase and not a chase. And then you've also got the injury, or the cramping, or whatever you want to call it. The fact he couldn't do what he wanted to do and couldn't run between the wickets and everything else. But the Capel knock is still very much up there. I think maybe the Viv Richards one is probably the best, if we're being honest. Certainly wasn't in a World Cup, but it was against a better attack, and he had to do a lot of it with one wicket left as well. Wasn't a chase. That's what I mean. There's so many different moving parts to all those innings, but they're all absolutely fantastic. And thank you very much for both these super chats. Nomal says, why do we not broadcast cricket in Spanish and Portuguese? There's a huge market in terms of number of countries. Would it be expensive addition to large sports production? We only just started producing cricket coverage in multiple languages. But you're right, we should. And I certainly think in the future that will be something that we will see. Cricket's a little bit far behind on that. And I think it was way too far behind on various languages in the countries that it should be doing. But yes, I think there should be an option to be able to watch cricket in any language you want to be able to watch it. If it's if you're in a cricket playing nation and there's more than a few million people who speak that language, and certainly, the major languages outside of cricket playing nations. And as you say, You've got Spanish and Portuguese. I suppose what you probably put France in there as well for, how many people in Africa speak French as well. I think there's an argument to be made for that. It's just that cricket isn't really run very well, and that's why we have this. Anyway, that's the end of the scoreboard. You're not going to believe this, though. Coming up next, I'm going to be doing one of my other podcasts. And then after that, I'm going to be doing one of my other podcasts. So if you're like, I don't think we've had enough Jared today, and I don't know how you could physically feel that way. But if you're feeling that way, there's 2 more shows coming up. So thank you to VK for his couple of super chats there. But after this show, we will be doing, I can't remember which one I'm doing first, either Wagon Wheel or Red Inca. I know on the Red Inca one, though, if the link is already live, we are doing, what was it? We are doing your favorite moments in the World Cup. So if you've got any favorite moments in this World Cup and you want to talk about them and you want me to chat about them or remember them, bring them up on the comments over there, and I'll certainly try and get to them as well. But thank you for everyone for your support. I'll see you in a few minutes. I'll see you in my dreams.
A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be. And from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster or making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link.